Yeah, it's funny because when I read the question about who would you recommend as a friend, I didn't think of any men.
It happens. Hi, I'm Missy,
Hi, I'm Elizabeth, and you should meet my friend. Today we are talking to my friend Laura Hatcher. Laura grew up as a military brat, is a 1992 graduate of the United States Naval Academy. She started her career as a Navy diving officer and eventually transferred to the intelligence community and has served in the Navy for 30 years. After retiring, she turned her love of photography into an award-winning business. Through her stunning photography, her mission is to help preserve legacies for veterans and their families. We met through our work with the annual Officer Women Leadership Symposium, where we discovered that we lived in the same neighborhood and had kids in the same high school, but did not know that until we worked together on that event. So welcome to the podcast, Laura. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question for you is Navy diving officer, is that in a scuba suit or in a submarine?
Neither.
Wow, what do I know?
It's okay. It's all right. They actually lied about the diving part. There wasn't much diving, which is why I didn't stay very long. But a Navy diver back in the day is a hard hat diver. So you're actually qualified to 165 or 190. It's been a while on air. And scuba is actually completely different, right? It's
Right.
you can only go so far down, and it's actually the beginning training for hard hat divers. So we do go through scuba training. In fact, I was scuba trained as a midshipman from the Naval Academy for my summer fun. Many people may realize that the service academies send their cadets and midshipmen out for summer training. And back then we had a choice of going to various types of training, and I chose scuba and jump school, Army's airborne school, because that was the kind of girl I was growing up. I can do anything you can do.
So, what does a hard hat diver do? Is that like underwater repairs of ships?
It could be. So back then it was for the officers, it was the designation was called Basic Diving Officer, or a BDO. And your career path in the early 90s when I graduated was you went through salvage school first. Why it was a little disappointing was because having gone through scuba school and what drew me to that community first of all was because I was an athlete going into the Naval Academy. That's how I got in. I was
Mhm.
a recruited athlete, played volleyball out of California, or at least I could spell volleyball, and it got me in. And then I learned how to be better to stay, I guess. But once I got in, when you're always a jock and an athlete in high school, that community was appealing to me specifically because back then, in order to qualify, regardless of whether you're a man or a woman, the standards were identical. And for me, that was important because I didn't want my male peers to look at me and think that I was standing next to them because I somehow had to do something less, right? Because as
Mhm.
we know, the physical training standards across all the services, there's a women's scale and there's a men's scale. Because this was a high intensity community and those hard hat suits are very heavy, women had to be able to do just as many push-ups and pull-ups and swimming and running and sit-ups as the men did. So that appealed to me. And that's why I was drawn to it. But what I didn't realize was I wasn't going to get to dive much as an officer. I actually spent more time driving a ship, which was not what I wanted to do. It was a diving ship, but still.
Then you decided, forget that, and I'm going to go over to Intel.
Yes, not before wanting to quit completely. I was actually on my way out the door. I didn't like it. It was a tough first tour, and my stepfather, who raised me at the time, was a retired E9. So in the Navy, that's a Master Chief.
Mhm.
And he's like, "Oh no, you don't get to hang up just yet because as you know, as a service academy grad, at the 8 year mark, it's not really 8 years, right? It's math in public. What's that? 12 years. And for me, it was a little bit more. It was like 13 years because I had done preparatory school. So I had done the 5 year, 4 year Naval Academy program. So by the time I got to be an O3 lieutenant in the Navy, after that first tour, in all that school, 2-3 years of school, dive school for a year, and then going to surface warfare officer school, and then going to engineering officer of the watch school. I mean, 2 full years of school, and then out into the fleet for a 3 year tour. It was an investment. And he said, no, you don't get to leave just yet. Find something else to do. And he's the one, like the mentors that you hope you can have.
Sure.
He's the one who explained to me about, in the Navy, it's called a lateral transfer. It's basically a change of designation, a change of community. You apply. You have to be successful in your last community. Only a small percentage get picked up for whatever community you're applying for.
Mm-hmm.
Apply for cryptology, which is what he was, or apply for intelligence. At the time, I did not realize that my dad was like mafia in both of those.
Oh my.
Both of those communities, now a civilian. And there were still people in uniform that knew him and revered him, but they didn't realize there was a connection because we don't have the same last name.
Mm-hmm.
So I did take his advice. I applied for Intel and I got picked up as a lieutenant and sent to basic intelligence school.
Well, it must have taken, because you stayed for a whole career after that move. What great advice you got from your dad.
Yeah, they just kept promoting me. So either that or everybody left and I'm the last woman standing, right?
Pivoting a little bit in our questions, where and when did you get the photography bug?
So sometimes I don't like telling people this because then they realize I really haven't been doing it that long. But I mean, I have recollections of doing photography in high school and being in a dark room and actually developing pictures, but not because I enjoyed it. I think it was just because I was one of those kids, especially since I was applying for the Naval Academy in high school, where I collected every single club and all the activities you can think of and every single sport. I was one of those kids, one of those geek jocks. But I didn't do anything with it. And then of course, as a parent, we know that we're constantly taking pictures or snapshots. But really in 2015, when I moved here, we'd been here a year. And what I like to say is I, as an only child, I grew up very bored. And my Master Chief father used to say things like, well, go play with traffic. And my mother would say, well, that's because you're a boring person. And so that would, that they were joking, but they would lead me to always go and find something to do, right? A hobby, an activity, stamp collector, you name it. I tried it. And so that never ended, obviously. Navy diver, jumped out of airplanes. It's just the theme. And so one winter, January of 2015, don't ask me why I'm bored with 3 sons and a full, so I was just got up here for my 06 tour. So I have no business being bored. Supposedly I was in a hard job, right? My first 06 tour. I went to the torpedo factory, which is in Old Town Alexandria. Mm-hmm. And there they have the Art League. And as you probably know, within the Art League, they offer a variety of art classes. And I took a basic photography course. And I show up on the first night with a point and shoot. And my instructor kind of looks at it and says, yeah, you need a real camera. That's not going to work. And he was from Africa. He had a very thick accent. He starts talking about f-stops, shutter speeds, and ISO. And I'm like, oh no, this sounds like math. This is not going to go well. Because doesn't matter that I went to the Naval Academy. I studied volleyball, remember? I don't do math. And I freaked out. I'm like, okay, not only do I have to buy a real camera, but I'm going to have to do math. But I went back and I'm glad I did, because I quickly realized that the camera gave me access to things I would never have had access to. And having only been in DC for about a year at that point, I knew, I was petrified to drive in DC, first of all. I'd spent my entire career avoiding the Beltway. And suddenly, once I made 06, it's like someone flushed the toilet and I got sucked in, right? So when I took this class, he took us out for field trips. And he would take us to places like the National Cathedral, which you can't just walk in and start taking pictures, right? You have to have special access. Those pictures came out horrible, so don't ask me about those. But I was hooked right after that. I was like, wow, this is so cool. To this day, I have a camera and a business card. I get away with murder. Well, not quite murder, but
like rule breaking.
And I belong, right?
So then from this basic class, where did you go to next? Was it self-study or more classes or?
Yeah, I did take more classes, but then I started, making some of my instructors nervous because they felt like I was good enough. Why was I in class? And I'm like, that's the officer in me. We have to nuke everything we get, right? We can't just be basic at it. We have to overstudy and overthink it and overanalyze. And that's basically what I did. I had a voracious appetite, mainly because photography just never ends, right? Mm-hmm. There's just so much to learn. How I got started in it, you may be familiar, Alexandria has that group called Cars and Coffee. Yeah, the classic cars that meet in the parking lot down by our pastry rendezvous. And I stopped there one day with my camera and started practicing. And then before you know it, 3 years later, I'm still practicing. And I'm taking pictures of these beautiful cars and it's developing my eye and my attention to detail. And then people started asking me if they could buy the pictures. And then the next thing leads to another. And suddenly I have an LLC and I'm freaking out about taxes. And oh my gosh, I'm sure I have to tell someone I'm making money. I literally stumbled into my business.
That was going to be my next question is, when did it go from a hobby to a business to your post-military job?
Yes, it went July, specifically 2017. So 2 years after that class, I formed an LLC, and we do this. I mean, let me pause for a second for if we have any transitioning veterans. We tend to think that we can Google and YouTube our way into anything, right? I mean, that's how I survived in the military, right? I sought out my mentors. I sought out the last guy, or don't do it like he did it. Leave it better than you found it. Every time I left someplace, I create an SOP because, the Navy never actually sent you a relief on time.
Yeah.
So you have to breadcrumbs. This is how I did it. And there's a lot of pride, right? While you're leaving your last command, you just this is your baby for the last 2 years. And so you want someone else to take it on and be just as successful based off of the foundation you leave. And that's essentially how I think I approached photography. I just wanted to get better and better and better. And I had a voracious appetite, and I started studying through various means, finding mentors. I walked into a studio, which is now my studio, a couple of years ago, and I asked a woman that was there, and I said, hey, I'm in the military. This is when I was active duty. I'm in the military and I aspire to be where you are eventually one of these days. And this is what we do. We ask people to be mentors. It doesn't matter that you don't know me. Trust me. And she did for about 3 years. Katie Garlock had that studio in Old Town, which is now mine. She introduced me to, professional photography. I got to go beyond experimenting. I started asking her questions about contracts and copyrights and business and pricing. I mean, these are all challenges that you can't Google and YouTube your way. You need somebody to help you with those. She was awesome. And then one day she just said, I want to move back to the Mideast or Midwest, excuse me, and be closer to my children and my grandchildren. I don't know why I asked her at that moment what was her rent, but that's what happened. I was like, really, how much rent do you pay here? I'm thinking, way in hell I can afford this. This is in Old Town, Alexandria. It's exorbitant down there. Well, it actually turned out it was reasonable. And keep in mind, this is a very small, cozy space. I know you've been there. It's tiny, Missy.
Your business and maybe 3 other potential kinds of businesses could fit in this space because it's like just enough for you. It would be hard.
It is
for other businesses.
It's not desirable. It's not a desirable space for anything other than what I'm doing, or maybe like a masseuse or some type of service that does appointment. It's very small. It's really actually not even desirable for me. I've grown out of it, but because I have 8-foot drop ceilings, and so it's hard to be creative with 8-foot drop ceilings. You can only do so much in there.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time when I said, let me see if I can take this on. This is 6 months before pandemic. Keep in mind, I didn't know how to take a portrait. I wasn't actually qualified to do anything once I got the space. I was an event photographer, and that's what the Navy teaches you: sink or swim. Build it and they will come. That's kind of the approach I took. How did I decide to? I think the follow-on piece of that was, how did I decide to leave the real job that I got after I retired and pivot?
I didn't know there was a job between retirement and the photography business.
There was. So the photography business was a side hustle. Basically, I retired in 2018. So I had the LLC from July so about a year.
Okay.
Prior to retiring. And I had a job as I found a perfect job right afterwards. And again, that overachiever kicked in. I had a job before I even got off of terminal leave. So in other words, for those civilian listeners, I was double dipping. I was on active duty, still getting paid as a Navy captain, and I was employed for about 3 or 4 months. And that's my first introduction to how hard it is to decipher taxes, because I got slammed with taxes that following year when I realized I made a lot of money in that small period of time where they overlapped. And I tell people, military transitioning, as you probably both know, it's much like becoming an adult again after you graduate from college. And having prepared with my husband, my 3 adult children, I suddenly found myself trying to learn how to adult, learning about healthcare and taxes and all these things that, the real world actually does. It was a rude awakening. The first job out of the military was with a nonprofit. And as much as I loved the job, I lasted about 6 months, 12 months if you're actually counting. I stayed on for an additional 6 months to finish the job. But I didn't enjoy it. Culturally, the organization had some challenges, and I'm giving you the PG version. When we stop recording, I'll give you the real version. And I woke up one day and I said, you know what? I want to go to work. I don't want to be upset and dread. I don't need this job. The Navy's going to pay me to work out for the rest of my life. Let me go do something I enjoy. And so what I tell people now is that my pension fuels my passion. And I try to tell that to transitioning veterans as well, is you can go ahead and find that ridiculously high-paying job, but it's going to come with drama and a commute and somebody else's values that you may not necessarily agree to. And you may find yourself back on deployment again, on I-95 on your way to Tyson's. So be careful what you ask for. Or you can take your pension and go find a low-paying job that you're absolutely excited about, and the two of them together will probably bring you back up to where you were. And part of that is just the fear of the unknown, right?
Sure.
You're so comfortable getting that paycheck and knowing what you're going to be doing next, that it's hard for you to fathom that you actually have to now make a decision on, because someone said you have a choice, which is, I think, was probably the hardest thing, was trying to figure out, what do you mean I can do what I want? I don't know what that means. I don't know what I like. I don't even know who I am. And
Mhm.
so having to introduce yourself to yourself is probably one of the first things you have to do when you leave, and figure out what you're passionate about. And I was just lucky enough to have a hobby that I could fall back on. Had no clue that I was going to turn it into what it is today,
Mhm.
but I'm glad it worked out.
I know, Laura, when we were getting ready to retire, we're from Indiana and we did not want to return to Indiana. And we were living outside of Seattle and we were like, where are we going to go? You know, he was getting ready. We were talking retirement and we were like, where are we going to go? And a friend of mine, she just laughed at that and she goes, I bet that's the first time you've ever gotten to choose where you want to go. Because usually Elizabeth told us where we were going to go. It really was like we can choose anywhere. And it was a very daunting task. Fortunately, we are familiar with the Cache Valley and we had a connection here, but it really was. It's like we can do anything. We can make decisions for ourselves. Both liberating, but also very daunting.
Well, I don't know if you noticed, I kind of skipped that decision because my children made it for me. They're like, they wanted to stay in Virginia in the high school
Yeah.
they were in.
Yeah.
And then they all went off to colleges around me. So it's like I couldn't go back to California and leave them.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
I feel like that decision is still out there if I want to grab it.
There you go. There's still time. You mentioned taxes as being a challenge as you transition. What's been your biggest challenge being an entrepreneur, a business owner?
Oh, do we have time for that? There's so many. The first thing I will tell you is time management, no pun intended, but 1,440 minutes, right? In a day, they're all yours. You have to actually determine how to use them, how not to get distracted, stay motivated every single day. And I discovered right away that I suck at that because apparently I was really good at it in the Navy, but it wasn't me that was good at it. It was all the people that were managing my time for me, like the admiral or the deputy or, the agenda for the day, the agenda for the week. Those were all, there was always something going on, right? In whatever job you have in the military, someone else is dictating your time, someone else is dictating the priorities. And now as an entrepreneur, that's you, you know? And so I still suck at it.
You don't have a substitute. So if you don't get up and do it, there's nobody else in Laura Hatcher photography to do it for you.
No, there isn't. And when you're first starting out, you can't afford it either. People are like, well, just outsource that. I'm like, yeah, okay. But I can't find anybody to do it for free. And then just staying motivated, because you don't realize that you're not just signing up to do the fun stuff. You're signing up to do all the things that that a business usually has a person dedicated to each function, right? So the marketing and the logistics and the strategic planning and the finance and the accounting and customer service, customer complaints, all of that. It's a little daunting, but much like your hobby farm, now that I know what that means, Missy. At first, I kind of treated my business like that. I'm like, I don't have to work today.
Yeah.
That pension's still coming. And then suddenly the brand got really strong and I started getting really busy. I'm like, oh, maybe I should grow up and start acting like a businesswoman. And start using some of these proceeds to implement, things that will help me be a little bit more. And you quickly learn, if you don't already realize it when you go into entrepreneurship, that your military training from day one is a blueprint for entrepreneurship. Everything that you've learned, no matter how junior you are to how senior you are, you're going to end up using it again. And so once that dawned on me, I'd sit back and go, okay, this is like the time I had to plan out a deployment for 300 people, or this is the time like I had to finance, the command for the next 5 years, or, so when you can draw on your experiences, that's when things tend to go a little better.
What do you find the most rewarding?
Oh, the people and the stories. So it's nerve-wracking. This is no secret, but I suffer from imposter syndrome, and I know everybody says, "Oh my goodness, you've made it. You shouldn't be doing that." But it's actually valuable sometimes because it keeps you grounded. But other times the anxiety just drives you crazy. But I really enjoy meeting people and solving problems, because I think that's really what a small business or a business in general, that should be the goal. Whether you know you have a problem or not, people may not recognize the fact that they don't have a headshot as a problem, but you'd be surprised how many people come in and go, "My boss told me I have to be here," or I really want that board position and I think I should look good for it, or I need a new job. Well, that's a problem, right? And my solution is, let's get you looking presentable. Let's get you looking as if you are ready to invest in yourself so that you can relay the message to whomever it is that you're willing to invest in them, right? That's the first thing, because it takes a fraction of a second to make a first impression. I mean, fractions. And if the only thing we see of you is selfies or poorly lit images, it does reflect poorly on you, I think, especially if you're trying to apply for a board, a prestigious position. And don't forget, as a veteran, the military that you came from, the service that you came from, defined you. You were essentially representing their brand. So now you need to figure out how to represent your own personal brand. You control that. So why not make it look good?
Right. That's my personal pet peeve. On all social media should be fun pictures, except for LinkedIn. LinkedIn has a very business, making business connections sort of function. And people have the goofiest pictures on LinkedIn sometimes. And I'm like, who's going to hire you if you're in like some costume on your LinkedIn profile? I mean, that's just so silly. Sometimes people think headshots might be for only like actors and super bigwigs, but I think it makes such a big difference in how you present.
It definitely does. And it's not just for career transition, right? I also do branding, which is business branding or personal branding, which is basically, showing your customers the who behind the what, which is really important if you're a small business owner. We tend to relate to who's driving the ship or who's behind the counter, and learning about their stories. Many websites that you go to today, your customer base is looking. And that first impression, when they open up your website, there's typically like an about page. I know I always go and figure out, well, who is running this place, and then I cringe when I see the pictures and I close the website and move on.
I'm on your website right now. And it pops up there, and I would like to give you a Navy greeting, bells and whistles, right? So I'm learning so much about you, Laura. No, but that's great.
We've become so visual, right? Well before the pandemic shut us all in and put us onto the computers, but the internet has made the world tiny.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, after the pandemic, obviously I had a little lull because, the governor of Virginia anyway shut down non-essentials, and I was the first in line, non-essential. Yeah. However, after we started coming out of the pandemic, guess what everybody was in demand of? They wanted a premium headshot, because now it was okay to be remote, and they knew that if they had a better picture,
right,
for their whatever, fill in the blank, whatever system they're on, they wanted it to look professional, so they didn't have to turn their camera on, I guess.
Yeah. No, I was just going to mention, so I actually work in funeral services. So I work at a funeral home. And one of the things that I had, one of my first experiences with when I started working there, was with funeral photography. And I saw that you do some, Laura. And
I haven't actually done one yet. Let me rephrase that. I have done one for my best friend's father's funeral. And if asked for Arlington, I would, because it's so close.
Yeah.
But that's a tough.
It is a tough, because, and so I have a friend, Tandy, who does it here, and she has a beautiful story and background about why she does that, why she has a personal quest to provide those pictures. But she and I have shared a lot of stories and just experiences together. And it is hard, but so many people come back to her later and say, I didn't think I wanted these pictures. And some people say, I want them, but I may never look at it. And she's like, totally understand. But the people who do thank her so much for those, because there's moments that you miss, or there's moments you want to capture, that feeling you want to capture.
It is important, not just funerals, but any milestone, right?
Right.
I do retirement ceremonies way more than funerals, but I actually just reminded me that I actually went and represented my stepfather in Puerto Rico for his mother's funeral.
Wow.
And asked me to take pictures. And I didn't go there in mind in terms of taking pictures. I went to represent the family because my parents couldn't fly because of their health from California to Puerto Rico. I was like, I don't know if I can do that because it's open casket, Catholic, Hispanic rituals. And it was hard, but I did it because he needed it. He needed closure.
Right. Oh, yeah.
He was very thankful, but very tough, very tough. You also touched on, I recently had, and this is not something I've figured out how to market yet. However, I did have a Service Academy person come for just a regular headshot and not so many words. This gentleman said, I always see when we pass away, they pull out the senior picture from, the last year at your Service Academy. But wouldn't it be nice if I could leave behind a really nice photo to my family?
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't when I was 18 or 19 or 23.
Right.
And I'm thinking, so if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is you're here because you'd like to have a beautiful obituary picture.
Yeah.
And my mom says the same thing. She's always like, don't you dare pull out my high school yearbook for my obituary.
Right. No, I think that is something we need to advertise. Like, y'all need to go and get a nice picture taken. My mantra is to live a life that you would want to write your obituary about, like she did all these great things. She was a wonderful person, whatever. And so to live that life so that your obituary is something worth reading or writing about. And so, we should take more pictures. I always say, take the pictures, like invest. It truly is an investment. In fact, I was looking for a local photographer, and several of them have listed, instead of, they do put their prices, but they list it under investment. And I thought that was a really great way to say to these people, listen, it may sound like a lot of money, but you're investing in these pictures. And I thought that's good marketing right there. They had me.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, Laura, but that's what you often say, is that we need more pictures, not less, of, especially women in uniform and moms, and your kids need to see what their parents were doing as they were growing up, as well as all the pictures we take of our kids growing up.
Right. I think if I was a multi-millionaire, I would hire someone to drive me, because it's not something I particularly enjoy. I have too much road rage. And two is I would have a photographer like paparazzi go with me on vacation, because we all know that there's like 2 pictures of us from, a week-long vacation, and it's probably a selfie. Because no one takes pictures of the moms.
So it's funny you should say that. I my friend and I daydream about having a travel business, and I'll be the photographer and you'd be the travel agent, and we'll just follow these people around. But if you think about it, there's actually there is a niche in photography. It's along the lines of a day in the life, where photographers offer documentary style photography, where they hang out in your house and just photograph life.
Oh, yeah.
Those moments that you don't remember, but they're every day. And I actually did that for a really close family of mine, family friend of mine. I'm the godmother of their youngest. And, they let, those are essentially, they have 3 children. They're all my models. So I just, one day hung out with them all day.
So where do you see your business? Talk about strategic planning. Where do you see your business like in the next 5 to 10 years? Or where are you dreaming of taking your business in the far future?
That's a tough question. I hope it's still around. I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't. Although my challenge is me, right? I get bored. I get bored quickly, and then something amazing will happen, and then it'll ground me. For example, this past year, an exhibit opened in Richmond, Virginia in January because with my photos in it, because the Virginia War Memorial in Richmond, Virginia commissioned me and another woman, Army veteran who owns her own videography company, documentary company. We were tasked with the staff of the Virginia War Memorial to go around the 4 locations in the state of Virginia to capture the portraits and the interviews of 50 Vietnam veterans from the state of Virginia, commemorating the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Paris Peace Accord, which was this past January. And so that was just an amazing experience. One, documenting history, and then just seeing, I see pictures every single day, but they're usually on this laptop, right, or my desktop. I don't see them blown up lifestyle and professionally mounted with this beautiful aesthetics. It was really well done. I was blown away. I was invited to the opening night with all the veterans, so all their families and all the veterans that came. Cool. It was so cool, and that was a serious high, right? And then it's back to death by 1,000 headshots. So sometimes you tend to lose your creativity because you get in the grind.
Oh yeah.
You're constantly working to keep up with the demand that you don't have time to actually do the things that got you there in the first place. And so I've recently reconnected with some photographers, and they've done great questions. Hey, let's just go on a walkabout and let's just go to DC and do street photography. I'm like, yes, that's where I started. Let's do that.
Yeah.
All right. Is it time for our questions? The actual questions we shared with you?
It is. And I suddenly misplaced mine. But here they are. Okay. Well, you want me to go ahead and start off with these questions, Elizabeth?
Yes, please.
If you could go back to your younger self and tell yourself something, what would you say?
I would say that it's okay not to fit in.
I love that.
I think I spent my entire childhood never fitting in, always being bullied, always being the kid that moved in from, because a Navy brat. And I was constantly looking to fit in. And even now, when people ask you, where are you from? That hesitation about, well, what do you mean exactly? And now I can, I might as well just say I'm from Alexandria. I've been here long enough. I've been here almost longer than any place I've lived. But yes, I would tell my younger self that it's okay. In fact, embrace the diversity, embrace the difference.
I'm so glad you said that. I actually had this same conversation with my 25-year-old son just a couple of weeks ago. We talked of this thing, and he's still struggling. He works remotely a lot, so he's gone from his home base. So he'll work someplace for a couple months or a couple weeks, and so he's really had a hard time finding his tribe and making connections. While the military gave him a lot of great experiences, he also always felt like he missed something by not being in one place for a long time. And I told him that exact same thing. I said, I should have preached to you, it's okay to not fit in. But I myself was trying to struggle to find a place to fit in.
Right.
And I read this book a couple of years ago, and it probably changed the way I started to look at moving and trying to fit in. And it's called Uninvited. And it basically just says that God has set you apart for something bigger and, better than fitting in will ever get you. And so that's great advice. And we should be telling all kids that fitting in really hides what makes you unique. So I love it. What friend of yours do you think we should meet? I think this is probably a question that Elizabeth would appreciate would come later in the conversation, but that's what's B on my list. But what friend of yours do you think we should talk to?
So I have a few friends, and there's one in particular that stands out that just in awe. Her name's Dr. Vanessa Gaddis. She's a retired Army 06, and we retired around the same time. And she went and started her own nonprofit and basically feeds families in need. So she has these amazing relationships that she's built through her community here in Virginia. She's one county over, and she gets food from all these different suppliers, and then she holds these food drives and hands them out so that, you know, kids have lunches and dinners. And during the pandemic, she was instrumental, right? Because there's so many families that were hit. And my sons used to volunteer with her periodically, and I did a ride along with her and took some of her branding photos. But truly, what's been impressive, and I haven't told her lately how impressed I am of her, but is much like anyone else watching my journey. You know, if you knew me from when I retired and where I am now, it's the same thing, watching her go from zero to, you know, all these awards and impact to her community, and how many people she's fed and how many children have been impacted by her, you know, just this amazing service that she's done. I think she would be a perfect person to talk to. Of course, she might say, Laura, who? Because it's been a while since I talked to her.
What's the name of her nonprofit?
The Prince William County Community Foundation?
Yes, I was just about to say that. Yes, the Prince.
What it is?
She does have a beautiful headshot.
Can you say the foundation again? Prince
Yes,
William?
The Prince William County Community Foundation and Company. And she's been doing it 5 years and 11 months, which is how long she's been retired.
Let's see. Our next one. What are you reading, watching, or listening to right now?
So up until this year, I would call myself a wannabe reader, meaning I'm the kind of person that goes into a bookstore and I get so excited about all the books. I pick them up, but then I have no attention span whatsoever to actually get through a book. I hate it because everybody around me, my best friend, my husband, my mother, are voracious readers, and they will go through books a minute. And I'm sitting here stuck on the same book all year long, trying to figure out why I can't post on LinkedIn that I had 10 books read for the year. We recently got a puppy. And apparently puppies need walking. So there's a lot of time I'm outside. So I decided, you know what? I was listening to podcasts, and it was always business podcasts. I just felt like I'm constantly on in business. Let me figure out a way. So I started doing some research into audiobooks. And then when I realized how expensive those were for somebody who wasn't excited about reading, I was like, well, maybe there's a free version. And sure enough, there are several apps that are tied to your local library. And I found that my library down the street, our library, Elizabeth, down the street, has an app called Libby. And in Libby, they have free audiobooks. And so you're not going to believe this, but I'm on my 5th book in 2 months.
Wow.
The Covenant of Water was like starting to read the Bible. It was that thick. It's an amazing book by Abraham Verghese. It's 31 hours. I'm not sure why I picked that one for my first, but and the library actually took it back from me after 21 days. So apparently I'm a slow listener as well as a slow reader.
Well, 30 hours, that is a lot of listening.
It was, but it was good. It was an amazing read. It was about it spanned from 1900 to 1977. It was a beautiful story about 3 generations, Indian families that were afflicted with this. I don't know if it was a disease, but at least 1 or 2 people in the family drowned in water, and where they lived in India was surrounded by water. But it was so beautifully written. And it turns out that the author has actually been awarded by President Obama for his literature, and he is a natural doctor himself. And so you can see that in the reading. It was amazing. And then just some quick reads after that, because I was so proud of myself after 31 hours. I went to something a little bit slower. I do realize that it's important to have an outlet, because I know one of your questions is going to be what I do for fun, and I don't.
What do you do to relax? Cannot be work, family, or a side hustle.
Yeah, I don't. I have two speeds: asleep and fast forward. There is no relaxing. There's an 8-month-old puppy. He's in fact, my stories on Instagram about how much time he just disrupts.
Yeah.
And nothing done.
Well, I had to mute myself on this podcast and go see why my dog was. I thought there was an intruder or the house was on fire, but it was neither of those things. She just was mad because her dad went outside without her. So
No, I do not have any hobbies. I've been telling myself I need to do that. I know it's not healthy. It's just one of those things where the business is all consuming, it's never ends. Always something to do. I'm either chasing down invoices or hey, did you get your pictures, or why didn't you get your pictures? Or marketing, there's just so much. And I know better than anybody that's not sustainable, but year 7, so far so good.
do you find that people just assume that you're going to bring your camera to every event and take pictures and offer your services for free?
Sometimes that would happen. Well, sometimes I would, right? Because in the very beginning, I wanted to get better. I wanted to expose myself to new things.
Right.
I would offer to do it.
Is there is there something you like to cook or eat or drink that makes the day's challenges fade away?
Oh yes, a good beer. I'm a sailor through and through.
I like it.
Yeah, so when I was on active duty, I would come home and well, just one beer is all I need, and I was stationed in Hawaii, so orders there are called poo-poos, and we'd say, okay, it's happy hour, pull out the poo-poos, where's the beer? I've had a day, and I'd be standing there in my khakis, taking off my belt and then pulled out. And we don't wear shoes in the house, but I'm basically in uniform still with everything open. And, okay.
Now I can do whatever else needs to be done. Yeah. What's your favorite beer?
I'm a bit of a beer snob, so it's not anything that is American and domestic.
So you said you don't like anything American or domestic, or the opposite? You like anything American or domestic?
Don't like Budweiser, Michelob, all that. So I was born and raised in Europe. I was born in England and raised by a British mother. But I also lived overseas, in Spain and all these other tropical countries. Funny side story, if I may, sea story, because we have a few.
Yeah.
I go to visit my uncle in England with my husband right as a part of our honeymoon. He lives in Stratford-upon-Avon, which is where Shakespeare's from. Beautiful town. We're having a barbecue, and he comes in. He goes, "Oh, I got you some beer," and my husband loves Guinness, and I love cider. He walks in with a 6-pack of Budweiser, and we look at each other like, "Oh my gosh, we have to drink this?" Well, it turns out that it actually wasn't so bad, because the alcohol content in British Budweiser is like 2 or 3 times as much than what the United States is. So we were off our rockers by the second can.
There you go. Made it so you could tolerate it, right?
Tolerable water at that point, yes.
Is there a cause or an organization that you support, and how can we direct our listeners to them?
Elizabeth is aware of this organization. I have a strong affinity for the Women's Memorial. I feel like I can do more. In fact, I just reached out to Phyllis Wilson because I was listening to General Milley's retirement speech in preparation for the battlefield. And in it, he talked about his parents and their naval origin, and that his mother was a wave. And I was like, I wonder if she's registered in the Women's Memorial. And she's not. And I was thinking, I need to do a better job of all the veterans that come through. I mean, I photograph hundreds of women.
Right.
And I typically talk about it, but I just think, and I told Phyllis, I'd really like to get involved in the ambassador program in some way or shape, not to the point where it, pulls me away from the business.
And if you go to womensmemorial.org, you can actually register somebody's service right there on the website. Very, very neat organization, and obviously something that you two have a strong connection to and are passionate about.
So very, very, very much appreciate your time, Laura. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This was fun. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
What did you think of Laura?
I was very fascinated by her. She has a great story and loves to share it. And that's found that very interesting. I loved what she said. Maybe you can help me remember this.
Passion plus pension equals happiness.
That's right. And I admire people who, especially when it's a second career, and they truly chase their passions. It takes a lot of guts, and you're just throwing caution to the wind, and it's been very successful for her, and it's just inspiring.
Yeah.
So
I can see some of her military leadership because she pursued a mentor and has really dove into classes and learning. And, even though she says she's very scattered and has to get herself to, to focus because it's a one person business. I mean, she does have a deliberateness to her planning.
Right.
Which is admirable.
As she said, the military gives you a blueprint for entrepreneurship. And she took many of those skills that she learned and incorporated that into something, I wouldn't say totally different than the military, because you can see the military influence in her work, and obviously that's what she gravitates toward.
Sure. That's the community that she serves with her photography. Not exclusively, but certainly a lot of it. But
absolutely. Yeah. So if people want to look up her work or follow her, I believe her website is laurahatcher.com. So lots of good information. You can learn more about her and what she's doing in the Virginia area. And then she led us to possibly some other people that we could talk to. So she was very informative. So
yeah, very. Find us at facebook.com/YSMMF podcast and Instagram at YSMMF podcast for episode announcements. Thanks.
So what exactly is a hobby farm? I'm not familiar with it.
Excuse me. It's just a hobby, and it doesn't make any money.
Oh,
gotcha, my definition.
Kind of hobby.
Yeah,
I don't know why I was thinking Hobby Lobby or maybe.
Oh, I know. No, we don't do that. No, we don't do crafts here either. That's Elizabeth's place. But we don't have animals, except for we'll have some neighbors who will put horses or cows out in our pasture, and we don't grow anything yet. Okay. I mean, I've had a garden, but I can't really say I've grown anything. And so, yeah, it's just kind of more for fun, and we have a nice little buffer, and so, yeah.
Cool. That is cool.
Yeah.